Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivaro. Today we got another special guest, exclusive interview on the line for us, Bruce Lombard of Lombard MMA, training Lorenzo Carter and really getting to know these Giants players and this defensive line. I'm so excited to talk to Bruce because he is a very unique individual who trains in MMA and specializes in hand fighting and teaching these guys some very unique skills that they can translate to the NFL level and the field. So I'm excited to get to know you, Bruce. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm ecstatic to get to know you, your background, and how you're helping our Giants players succeed more on the field, because we want to see them have the best season 2021. And I want to know about your background in MMA, how you got to where you are now, and really all the different functions of MMA that you've learned and perfected over the years to get you to a point where you're teaching these guys some very unique skills and strategies to really, I guess, raise their level at the NFL.
Well, I've been doing martial arts for about 30 years, and in about 2001, I started coaching, and then eventually opened up my own business, which is called Lombard MMA, and we're located in State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State University is, and the MMA FX, Mixed Martial Arts Football Cross Training, is the program that I go around the country or work with some NFL guys on developing their hand skills, their timing with their hands, hand-eye coordination, rhythm with their hands, non-dominant hand control. I'm not a pass rush expert. I'm just a hands person that uses boxing, background in boxing, background in wrestling, and then it's a traditional martial art called Wing Chun. Wing Chun, if you don't know what that is, everybody knows who Bruce Lee is. So if you watch a Bruce Lee movie, all his hand-to-hand combat basically comes from a Wing Chun art. So I took those three backgrounds that I had in my martial arts training and blended them into a program that would be conducive for a football athlete to improve his hand speed, his timing, his precision. I looked at it as all these football athletes are always doing footwork drills, speed drills, and they're obviously lifting weights. But what are they doing with their hands, and how are they trying to improve their hand speed and their hand-eye coordination? So I had a couple high school football coaches that trained with me about 10 years ago, and they came to me with this idea because they saw so many similarities in mixed martial arts training and boxing training. So I took what they mentioned and advised, and I ran with it and developed a program. And then living across the street from Penn State University, or not living, my gym is across the street from Penn State University. I started reaching out to coaches there and players, and it took a couple months before anybody ever responded, but I kept doing it. And then eventually a couple players and a coach responded, and then they kind of gave me a shot. Guys would come down to the gym and train with me, and that kind of got things going. And then eventually they started incorporating me or my program more into their training with their athletes. So that's how it got started. And then it just continued working a lot with Penn State football players. And then eventually a lot of the players that went on to the NFL, I continued to work with them. And then it started to grow even more. So then I started traveling around the country, going to universities and kind of guiding and coaching their coaches to how to train the program. So I've been to Alabama, Oklahoma, University of Washington, to name a few. And now it's, I got the connection with some of the Giants players through my friends that are now coaches there, which is the D-line coach, Sean Spencer, Coach Chaos. And then the head strength coach now with the Giants, who just came in with Coach Judge, is Craig Fitzgerald. And both those guys kind of gave me my shot when they were at Penn State, and we developed relationships and friendships. And now I'm fortunate to go around and train all these great NFL athletes and college football programs, and really enjoy sharing this program, and hoping that it gives athletes the benefits. And the motto of the program is called Gain an Edge. So we're trying to work their hands enough so they can get pretty efficient and proficient with their hands that it can help them gain an edge on the field. So that's kind of how it all got started years ago, and then just developed, and some guys gave me some ideas about some football cross training. and then I met other guys, coaches, and developed relationships, and now we're here talking today.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I've been to Penn State before a couple times, and I wasn't working on my hand-eye coordination. I was working on my beer consumption.
Yes. That's a lot of that here. Exactly.
Yeah,
they have a whole. All my members who are mostly Penn State students. So I was like, hey, we train hard and then we play hard on the weekends. Train hard during the week, play hard on the weekends. So yes, there's definitely a good amount and share of alcohol consumption in our town.
Yeah, there's a whole land, frat land, like a frat land. It's like literally like a village of just frat houses. It's the most insane thing you'll ever see in your life if you've never been to Penn State.
The football games here, and it looks like they're going to have fans back again in the fall and tailgating. Can't wait, because what an experience that is here at Penn State. That's for sure.
It's insane. Don't they have like the biggest stadium in college football?
I think top 3. I think maybe Michigan and Tennessee maybe or bigger. I'm not sure, but it's top 3. It's 107,000.
It's a huge stadium. Yeah, huge stadium. The thing is, it's just a mammoth of a freaking stadium. And I'll tell you, like, as a player, I can't even imagine the intensity of that. Just the white and blue everywhere. And you're training with these guys to help them improve their game and hopefully make it to that next NFL level. And when you're starting to train with some of these athletes and you're working with their hands and their hand-eye coordination, what are some of the weaknesses that you see in their games and the weaknesses you see in their hands that maybe are underdeveloped? Maybe playing video games isn't enough to increase that hand-eye coordination. They really got to get those. They need you to come in, the specialist to come in and work them down, because obviously a lot of people are saying they work out with you and they're like, this is the hardest workout I've ever done. I am dead by the end of this, way more than when I'm doing Olympic lifts or deadlifts or a normal workout in the gym. Why is it that it's so intense? Is it more cardiovascular? What are you doing to make this such a intense and just beneficial workout for them?
Yeah, well, I think combat sport workouts are second to none. And one of the obviously everybody that does, most people, 99.9% of people that train in martial arts or boxing, they're never going to fight or compete. They're just there for an alternative workout, or maybe learn a self-defense, or maybe have an amateur fighting career, whichever. But I think, second to none when it comes to a workout. And for a combat athlete, if they're not in great shape, that is a dangerous thing, because in that sport, you're going to get punched, kicked, choked, whatever it might be. So you better have your fitness and your wits about you, or it's not going to go so well. So again, the fitness workout you get with this, muscular endurance, cardiovascular endurance, strength, even through combat sport workouts, boxing, wrestling, whatever, mixed martial arts. It's just such a great workout. And part of this program, we do boxing workouts, like a lot with the offensive linemen. I train a lot of boxing with, to work their hand-eye foot coordination, punching power, hip explosion, even some kickboxing we'll do depending on what they're looking for. But again, it's not only for great conditioning. The technical parts of the sport of combat sports, boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, crossover, in this case, so much to football that I'm surprised this type of training isn't utilized by more football athletes at all levels. I think it's just great cross training. So the workouts, if it's more of a boxing technical conditioning workout, can be really hard. Even the hand fighting I do, it's very similar to a boxing workout, because we're working our hands, developing shoulder endurance. So that can get pretty intense too. Most of the times when I train with these guys, these athletes, it's a 90-minute max. Even sometimes just an hour is fine, because by then, mentally and physically, they're pretty drained. And anything you do over 90 minutes, when you get mentally fatigued, then the physical development starts to detract. So we keep it at a minimum, or a max of 90 minutes typically, for best results when we train the guys in the MMA FX program, whether it's conditioning through boxing and wrestling, or it's hand fighting.
Yeah, because I remember spending about an hour just boxing, with Dad's friend, and I remember after an hour, my arms were like literally noodles. Like I felt like I just went to a Chinese restaurant and they freaking sauteed my arms. It was ridiculous, and like that's kind of what you're doing to these guys. You're creating this cardiovascular endurance for their arms. Now, when they're hand fighting and they're going to battle in the trenches, they can last the entire course of a game. And Joe Judge is going to love you for that, because he just said And one of our receivers, Sterling Shepard, just said a couple weeks ago, I've never met a coach that harps more on endurance and cardiovascular training and making sure that we're in shape and that we're not just doing it on our own. We're doing it in practice. And like it benefits this team because when it's crunch time in the fourth quarter, you need to have all that energy and that cardiovascular endurance. It's there and it's there at your disposal. And I think that's a big, big portion of what you're talking about in terms of helping these guys develop more of that.
Combat sports and football are so close to each other as far as philosophy, concepts of technical development as well. And then conditioning. I mean, combat sports, conditioning is what we constantly say. Doesn't matter how good you are technically. If you're gas out, your technique's going to crap. And then once you have mental fatigue, then we all get dumber. Yes. So it's from what I've learned and what you just said, even that Coach Judge comes in and the Giants going to be they're going to be the most conditioned team out there on the field, and that will provide results, in my opinion. So.
I agree with you because last year our offense wasn't very good. Our defense was the bread and butter to our team and our unit. And fourth quarter came along, our offense again, kind of getting kicked off the field, defense coming on. Those guys were playing elite football the entire year in the fourth quarter, and they were on the field for a majority of the game. So that endurance portion, it pays off in the final moments, and you see it on the field. It's very translatable. When we're talking about your background and your learnings over the years, what are some of the biggest takeaways that you've taken away from just a physical and mental approach of learning MMA, different styles of MMA? How has it kind of shaped who you are? Because I want to learn a little bit more about you and how MMA has really affected your life.
Yeah. Well, I played sports all growing up in high school. My dad was a coach, and so then when I got into martial arts after pretty much sports were done, I trained in it, competed a little bit. And then when I started coaching it, obviously here now I'm coaching some high-level athletes, and I'm very lucky and appreciative I can do that. And I have some competitive fighters that train at my gym as well, but sometimes the most rewarding is the 98% of the other people that aren't going to compete or aren't an NFL player, that you see how it empowers them physically, mentally, through technical development, through fitness and conditioning and weight loss, whatever mental strength. That's why the martial arts and combat sports are just so great, not only physically, but mentally, socially, emotionally, for all kinds of people, whatever their goals might be. I just training NFL guys, the goal is a little bit different. This is a contract, supporting your family, supporting yourself. So there's a little bit more on the line when I'm training these guys. I realize that this is a livelihood for them, that we're trying to make better. And like I mentioned, help them gain an edge, because all those guys at the NFL level, they're all freakish athletes and they're all the best. So the margin of error is very small. So we got to make sure that, and my goal is to make these guys' hands as fast and their hand-eye coordination, their timing, their rhythm as perfect as I can, so they can utilize this the best they can on the field. It's not going to be, they're not going to go out there with 100 sacks a year, but if their hands can help them 5-6 plays a game, where they can get a sack, tackle for loss, disrupt, whatever, then that might be another contract or more wins or whatever. So that's how kind of I approach it when I train these high-level NFL guys.
Well, that's actually the perfect way to approach it, because that one rep, it could change the entire course of a game. If that sack turns into a fumble, if that turns into a fumble recovery for a touchdown, if a tackle for a loss is on third down, they punt it and your offense scores. You never know. That Joe Judge says this too. Football is a game of inches. Every single play, every single minute, second counts. So you're hitting it on the head, really, because all these minute details plays into long-term success and short-term success.
And that's it, Anthony. Combat sports is about split seconds and inches or centimeters. Difference between knocking somebody out and getting knocked out yourself. And football is, like you just said, is not much different. As far as, it's not different. It's a game of inches and split seconds. And that's why when I work with these guys, and Lorenzo and I, when we work, we're repetition after repetition. And that's what we hound on. And through that repetition becomes muscle memory. And then when things are fast or fourth quarter, tired, you're rocked in the head, whatever it might be, you can just continue to react and do what you've done through repetition. So that's what we really focus on, is just the technique development, learning it, seeing it, training it, and then through repetition, perfecting it.
Absolutely. And Anthony, I'll let you get a couple questions in here.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know, like, with training for MMA, are there any like abnormal, atypical, unique like weightlifting exercises that you might do to get your body in shape for a combat sport?
Yeah. So and this is why I tell everybody, because I get that question a lot. I'm not like a strength coach. That's not my comfort level. Like, believe it or not, I YouTube a lot of things for what my next workout's going to be. Thank God for YouTube. You can learn anything. So, with our combat athletes that actually compete, they get a lot of their physical strength and endurance through actually training the sport itself. Punching, your arms are contracting, exploding, your legs are contracting, exploding, wrestling through that body weight and constant grinding, pushing and pulling. So some of our guys barely even lift. They'll do some road work with their running and cardiovascular endurance, and through that running builds that leg strength. But a lot of our guys, and if they do lift, it's kind of in the gym, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and out. Kind of like these high intensity workouts where you get in, get out, lesser weight, higher reps. Just so the more bulky you are, the more oxygen that takes up, the blood takes up. You see some of the guys that are big and bulky, their cardio is not too good. So we like long, lean muscle. But again, that's not my expertise. So a lot of times for my athletes, they kind of figure out what works best for them, and they go from there. But I do know the type of training we have works those fine muscles. Like, I've had a lot of guys over the years, these NFL guys who are obviously strong, 400-pound benching and 500 deadlift or squats and stuff, but they get in and they do a combat sport workout, and they're not only gassed cardio wise, but muscular endurance is just different. And that's why I always recommend that combat sports is a great cross training for any sport, not just for football.
So. Absolutely. And with that training, that combat sport training, how exactly might that translate to the NFL or to football in general? Like, what benefits do you gain from MMA training, specifically as an NFL pass rusher?
Well, I think some athletes cross-train, and if we could talk about football athletes, they do it for conditioning. And the guys I talk to that I only get to for a short amount of time because of location, I always tell them to find a boxing coach. I think boxing is a great cross-training sport for football, no matter the position, but certainly for a pass rusher. Not just to hold pads so you get a great workout. That can be fun and everything, but utilize boxing as a technical sport that can be beneficial to your sport. Learning how to use your full body for explosion on your punches and your bull rushes or your long arms, whichever. Learning how the footwork that comes with boxing. Obviously the eye-hand foot coordination. The workouts are great for mental toughness because they're hard workouts. Alex, as you mentioned, you've been through a boxing workout or martial arts workout. So there are different types of workouts. And for football guys, the violent mentality is kind of what combat sports is. So it's a mental thing that's very similar to football. But yeah, like I said, I think I mentioned you guys earlier that I'm surprised more football athletes don't get involved in their off season with boxing or some kind of martial arts training. But certainly boxing and then wrestling, I think, are the two best crossovers for a football athlete, in my opinion.
And getting those football athletes involved with all this stuff, of course, you have a relationship with Coach Chaos, the defensive line coach for the New York Giants. How did that relationship begin, and how has knowing him helped you connect with the Giants or really with the football world in general?
Yeah, so when I devised this program or came up with it, and again, it's been a work in progress. I learn all the time when I go different places and try to manipulate a little bit better to make it as perfect as possible. But there was this Craig Fitzgerald, the current Giants strength coach, who gave me my chance when he was there at Penn State under the Bill O'Brien coaching staff right after Paterno. And then they were just there a couple years, and they went to the Houston Texans. And so, and I continued that relationship with Coach Fitzgerald. And then Coach Chaos came in with the Franklin staff. And once he got here, we the players that were training with me, kind of connected us. And he's a huge advocate of hand fighting and understands what it's used for and how it can help. So we developed a relationship not only through the hand fighting and combat sports with football, but then we became good friends as well. So once they got to the Giants, last year we were talking about doing some things, but then COVID hit. And so even this year, the whole COVID off season was restricting a lot of opportunities to work with guys. But then eventually they had Lorenzo and O'Shane were in the area doing their rehab. And Coach Chaos just said, hey, I was coming to New Jersey pretty frequently to work with a gym in Wall Township called the Asylum Sports Football Academy. So it's about an hour drive from the facility. So Lorenzo came down and with Coach Chaos's suggestion, and we started working out a little bit, and then we continued to work out for like the last 2.5 months, and then O'Shane and I just started last week. So, but that's how the connection with Sean Spencer, Coach Chaos, and how they've supported my program and advocated for me and given me a bunch of different opportunities and chances to work with a lot of great coaches, great football programs, great athletes, NFL athletes, and I'm thankful to both those guys.
Yeah, and that's tremendous. Coach Chaos got you that connection with Lorenzo Carter. And then, of course, that's ultimately how we found you. We saw the video of you training with Lorenzo Carter. So I'm curious to know, how has that been working with Lorenzo, and what specifically have you been working on with him?
Yep. So it's been great working with him. He's class act, just obviously a great athlete. We can all see that on TV, but very personable, hardworking, humble. So it's just been great for me working with him. And with an athlete like that, you can take the program to maybe another level. So when we first started 2 months ago, obviously he'd never done any boxing before, wrestling, any combat sport, any of this hand fighting before. So, he was very raw. But how I teach the program, it comes from my growing up in a coach's household. Very fundamental. I'm very methodical. So he liked that. That's how he approaches things as well. So we were able to, just go slowly through the program. I knew he was committing to it. So I knew I wasn't going to have him for 3 hours and then that was it. For this type of training, you need hours and hours and hours of learning and developing it. And then you got to have continued repetitions as you go through for it to work for you. So I knew he was committing to that. And so we start out at a really slow pace and pretty methodical, but now we've been together 25, 30 hours. And I've had another good guy, a guy named Anthony Zettel, who was my original guy, worked with at Penn State, now in the NFL, and he actually is in my instructional video with me. He was phenomenal. He was one of Coach Chaos's D-line guys. And but Lorenzo now is as good as he was, or he is. And that's because he's put the time in, and we've had a lot of hours together to go over things, and and we're perfectionists. So every time he screws up, I'll let him know. He doesn't get frustrated. He just works harder. So I'm anxious to see. I know his hands are better, and I know his hand-eye coordination is better. So I'm really anxious and hopeful that they'll all pan out really well, and he'll have a great season.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting to see all that stuff translate to the field. And you mentioned how personable Lorenzo Carter is and how you're having these discussions with him. So I'm curious to know if he gave you any maybe self-reflected insight on his game. What has he told you that he's trying to build on that's a strength for him? Or if there's any weaknesses that you're helping him try to turn into a strength?
Yeah, we haven't had much dialogue on that because my expertise, I guess, that's what we want to call it, is hands and eyes. And I know that obviously he's a great athlete, so he already had some good hand-eye coordination. I just knew I could take him to another level through repetition and through dialogue and learning. So that's pretty much all we focus on, or what we have dialogue about, is how we're improving his hands, how we're improving his eyes, his focus, peripheral vision. We're developing rhythm. So I like to say we're teaching him, or any of these athletes I work with, is how to dance with their hands. So everything's rhythm. It's just like dancing. It's just you're developing rhythm with those hands. And with rhythm and technical development and working your timing and your precision, eventually that leads to speed, leads to power, and which is our main goal, is to have his hands be extremely violent. And in football, it's a violent sport, but we always talk about having violent hands, but violent hands are under control. So limited motion, we focus on limited motion. We always talk about no wasted motion. We talk about minimum movement. The more movement you have, the higher margin of error. So we're really condensing and limiting movement. And I'm seeing results. We both are. But the key is we're doing this in training in a kind of controlled environment. The next thing will be, how is he going to do it against a large 300-pound, 6'5" freakish athlete that's trying to knock him on his butt. So that's the final test. But that's what we're trying to do. So when that test comes, he'll win more times than not.
That's going to be exciting to watch. And before I turn it back over to Alex, with Lorenzo, and you mentioned a lot of hand-eye coordination, foot-to-hand coordination, all of that stuff. And of course, Lorenzo did suffer a Achilles injury last season. So I'm curious to know, in training with him, how has he looked to you? Do you think he's healthy and ready to go for the season?
Yeah, I can only speak on what I see with our training and his hands and his eyes. We're not doing tons of footwork as far as cutting or explosion. We do footwork. This training's not just about hand and eye development. It's about foot development, hand-eye foot coordination. We focus as pass rushers, hand-eye foot development. You got to have all three of them. So our focus my focus and what I can provide is that hand-eye coordination. Again, when I train other athletes, like O-line guys and even defensive line guys, different types of training, especially the boxing, then we focus more on footwork. But for right now, it's just the hands and the eyes. So that's where I know that he's improving.
Awesome, man. Well, that's a lot of good information on Lorenzo Carter. And when he first started up with you, how was his stamina? Did he last very long until he was gassed?
Yeah, well, he's a machine. So what's very unique. So typically when I do this type of training, it's 90 minutes max is what we'll do in one training session. By 90 minutes, at that point, either physically, mentally, or both, they're starting to struggle. So I figure anything over 90 minutes, it's not to to the athlete's benefit. Because if you get mentally fatigued, then your technique starts to get sloppy. Obviously, if you get physically fatigued, your technique is going to get sloppy. So we go 90-minute max. What I do generally with most guys, sometimes just an hour. But with him, because of my travel and trying to fit it in with all the other stuff he is committed to, we'll do like 6 to 7 hours a weekend. So initially we did like 4-hour sessions. I think I was more exhausted than him, and I wasn't even doing that much. So I was blown away with his ability to have mental focus and the physical stamina to continue to do that. Because we've, obviously we're evolving and workouts are getting a little bit more intense. We cut them to 2-hour sessions. So again, I go a little bit beyond what I always recommend, but again, because of travel and I don't live near him, I have to travel 3-4 hours. And because of his other commitments, we do the best we can on a weekend, but we keep it to about 2 hours. And he does great with it. So really impressive.
It's awesome, man. It's awesome. It's funny. Like when you're doing combat sports, like mixed martial arts, you pick up a lot of like nicks and knacks. And like my dad used to come back with like cauliflower ear. Still has these freaking huge ears. The guy could float in the ocean with them. It's ridiculous. Yeah. He used to drain them out like with the liquid and stuff, and it was just disgusting. But
Yep.
I'm just remembering this now. It was just like I remember he'd come back and I'd be like, "Yo, what is wrong with your ears? They're like massive." And it's just because he had the gi, because he was in jiu-jitsu, and just like rubbing the headgear all on the ground and stuff. And it was an interesting thing. Do you think, like, what are the most beneficial functions of MMA that, professional athletes can utilize to improve their game, whether it's just boxing, maybe kickboxing, or, which ones do you think would you recommend to maybe athletes that are watching the channel that they could potentially partake in to improve their game and hand-eye coordination? Jesus.
Yep. Well, first of all, conditioning. If they're looking for a different type of conditioning that has the same kind of mentality and approach as a football athlete, and as I mentioned earlier, any athlete. I cross-train tennis athletes, hockey, field hockey, lacrosse, and it's second to none as far as cross-training for any sport or any athlete in any sport. So I recommend that to anybody if they can find that. Football specifically, again, as I said, it's just similar mentality, similar approach. Football guys like to hit people. That's what combat sports generally is. Obviously it's safe for most people, but competitively you're hitting people. It's the nature of the sport. So I recommend conditioning is kickboxing. I coach Muay Thai kickboxing. There's different kickboxing arts. I think Muay Thai is one of the best, if not the. Muay Thai is, you see guys in UFC, 99% of them have a Muay Thai coach. So that's how high respected Muay Thai kickboxing is. Boxing, if you can find, but there's more boxing coaches than Muay Thai coaches. So I think boxing coaches you can find a little bit more. I recommend that. Certainly the submission grappling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very popular. Wrestling is, as I mentioned earlier, boxing and wrestling. If I was going to take two sports, which is what I do to work cross-train football athletes, it's those two. To work for the conditioning is great. And then if you get the boxing, you get the hand-eye foot coordination. Wrestling, you get a little bit of the hand fighting, the pushing, the pulling, the body weight, the pummeling, all comes with it. So with Muay Thai kickboxing, I think of a lot. It's injury prevention because you're helping your flexibility in your lower half of your body, your core, your hips. So we do a lot of Muay Thai kickboxing with some of these NFL high-level athletes and a lot of times we think of injury prevention with their midline. Plus, it's a great conditioning workout. So combat sports, conditioning, and hand-eye foot coordination. If you're an athlete, football athlete out there, or any athlete, go find your gym locally and use that as a cross-training method to improve your ability in your respective sports.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for all this great information. And my last question for you before we wrap up here, and I'll let you get back up to Weehawken. I'm sure you've heard about all this Logan Paul and Jake Paul nonsense and them trying to get into the MMA space. How badly do you want to see Jake Paul get the shit kicked out of him?
Yeah, Alex and Anthony, that's just first of all, those two Paul guys, they're not bad boxers. They're decent as far as an amateur level. But yeah, it's becoming just a celebrity showcase, it seems, and I guess a YouTube fascination. But I really don't follow it. But I've had that same question asked to me about 10 times over the last week because they just set up another one with one of the brothers with Tyron Woodley. Yeah. And then when's the Mayweather? Is that this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's coming up on Sunday. I think it's a Sunday.
I can't wait for him to get rocked. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think with Floyd Mayweather and Tyron Woodley, I actually think they want to hurt these guys. So just to prove a point and just shut them up. Because what they've had before were kind of generic stuff. Even with that Ben Askren, he's this elite world-class wrestler, but he's not an elite boxer by any means. But these two brothers are, they're decent with their boxing. But I think these two guys, Woodley, who's not really known for his striking, he's more of a wrestler too, but still, he's a world champion. And Mayweather, I think they are going to look to knock him out. I don't think it's. I could be wrong. I hope it's just not a showcase for people to pay for the pay-per-view and then get robbed of their money again.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, But maybe these two guys, Mayweather and Woodley, can be different. Just go knock them out and just stop all this. So,
It needs to end now. It's just a money grab. It's just these guys. I mean, they have the platform that's hundreds of millions of dollars, you know.
but that's the thing. We're talking about it, and I don't know if I'd pay for it, but if it was free, I would definitely watch it.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, but,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm going to be interested to see if these two guys, Mayweather and Woodley, come out and just look to knock them out in the first round as fast as they can. If that's the case, we know it's legit. If they dance around for 3 or 4 rounds, then we're going to know, okay, it's just for the money.
Exactly. But Bruce, my man, thank you so much for coming on Fireside Giants, telling us about your interaction with Ocean and Lorenzo Carter, and how you're helping these Giants players get to the next level in their game. And it's really awesome to speak with you, because this is a very unique way of training. And like you said, not a lot of people are doing this. It's a very new kind of space that the NFL is kind of going in the direction of. And I think you're getting in at the right time with Joe Judge, because you said it best. The cardiovascular is super important in the late in games. You need to have that. And Joe Judge is very much a big proponent of conditioning, and he is making these guys run. He's making these guys do all these different things. And MMA seems to be the perfect cross training relationship for the NFL. These guys are like the modern day gladiators after all. So, they need to be good in that respect. So I think it's really awesome what you're doing. I'm really excited to talk to you in the future and see, how you help these guys in this defensive line, and maybe even the offensive guys too. It's really exciting, and I wish you the best of luck, man. Your journey to this step has been just incredible, and I can't wait to keep watching you and getting some videos of your training sessions with the guys.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we connected, and thanks for giving me a chance to talk about the MMA FX program. And I look forward to talking to both of you guys again. And I respect what you guys do. I'm a fan. So thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
Okay, talk to you again soon. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Anthony. We'll see you.
Have a good one.
Bye.